Hello and welcome back to day 42 of How to Fix the World in 80 Days, and today we're talking about addiction. We all know someone who suffered from this terrible disease, so I've come up with 3 simple steps that should have us all sorted out in no time. Number 1, you need to figure out if you actually have an addiction, because not every bad habit is an addiction. I mean, there are over 1 billion smokers in the world. They're not all addicts. We tend to define certain behaviors as addictions and certain behaviors as okay, but that's not really fair. For example, we would tend to assume that everyone who smokes crack must be an addict, but that's not necessarily true. I mean, you could smoke crack and still be the mayor of a major metropolitan city, so it can't be all bad. At the same time, we would say that working is considered good person behavior. But if you work 14 hours a day and haven't seen your kid in 3 weeks, I mean, hello, that is addict behavior. But would I say that they should necessarily stop working altogether? No, of course not. So clearly, defining what is and what is not an addiction is much harder than we thought. If after all that, you still feel like you're an addict and not just having the occasional good time, then let's move on to step number 2. Step number 2 is to ignore all the science, because if you start doing research, it's not gonna look pretty. Basically, the odds are stacked against you. Some studies say that there are genetic and social predispositions that make you more likely to be an addict. So if you are around people who were or perhaps are still exhibiting addict behavior, then you are more likely to be one as well, and you might literally even have it in your blood. Making matters worse is some addictions even have a physical effect on your body. For example, if you're addicted to sex, then there is a literal trigger for dopamine in your brain. Or if you're addicted to cigarettes, then there is a nicotine that is literally trying to draw you back in. All this adds up to the fact that recidivism rates for addictions are quite high. One study on smoking cigarettes found that after just 1 year, 44% of people had gone back to smoking full time. And that study was done on people who had medical conditions, so you got to imagine that for the casual smoker, the rates are going to be even higher. Bottom line is, once you start an addiction, it's much harder to stop. But that doesn't matter, because step 3, if you really want to solve your addiction, at some point you need to ask yourself this very basic question. What's more important to you? Is it your addiction, or is it your life without your addiction? Because the simple truth is life is short, and the best way to make use of the short time that we have here is to do what makes us happy. If what makes you happy is your addiction, then maybe it's not the craziest thing in the world not to stop. But like every decision we make, that also comes with consequences. If you continue, you may very well hurt yourself or people that you love. So to be 100% sure that you are making the right decision, you just need to do the easiest thing in the world. Make a pros and cons list. So let's take smoking for example. What are the pros and cons? Pros: you look really cool. You get more breaks at work. Your hands don't shake as often, etc, etc, etc. Cons: tons of health issues, really expensive, your breath smells like shit, you have to go outside in the winter, and on and on and on and on. If after looking at that list you still feel like you want to smoke, then as far as I'm concerned, that's your prerogative. Who am I or anyone else to say what should or should not make you happy? The reason most recoveries fail is because we keep trying to fix people who don't want to be fixed. They haven't made their pros and cons list yet, and if they have, it's us who refuses to accept it. But here's the problem with that. The only person who can truly fix an addiction is the addict themselves. We often stigmatize addicts like they're bad people, but the truth is, we're all addicts. We're just addicted to different things. If you become addicted to trying to save an addict, then who's going to save you?